Most people who are broke are not broke because they don't earn enough. They're broke because they are flying completely blind with their money. No dashboard, no scoreboard, no way of knowing whether the financial decisions they're making every single month are building something or quietly consuming everything they've worked for. They earn, they spend, they hope. And then they wonder why, after years of decent income, the number in their account looks almost exactly the same as it did when they started. I want to introduce you to Chris. Chris is 34. He earns $72,000 a year. By most people's standards, Chris is doing fine. He has a car, a nice apartment, a social life, and a job he doesn't hate. But one evening, Chris is sitting at his kitchen table doing something he had never really done before, actually looking at his finances. Not just checking his bank balance, really looking. And what Chris discovers in that hour at his kitchen table is one of the most uncomfortable things a person can realize about themselves. Despite earning a solid income for over a decade, Chris has almost nothing to show for it. No real savings, a retirement account that barely registers, and more debt than he realized he was carrying. Chris is not unusual. Chris is almost everyone. My name is Ken, and on this channel we talk about the financial truths that most people only discover when it's already too late to change course. Today I want to share the 4 numbers that Chris learned that night at his kitchen table. The 4 numbers that every millionaire tracks consistently, and that most people never learn until the damage is already done. These are not complicated formulas. They are not advanced investing concepts. They are 4 simple metrics that anyone can monitor starting today, regardless of income, regardless of starting point, regardless of how many years have already passed without tracking them. And I promise you, by the time we get through all 4, you will understand your own finances in a way that changes every money decision you make going forward. If this is the kind of content that genuinely changes how you think about money, subscribe and hit that like button right now, and let's get into it. Number 1, your savings rate. This is the single most powerful number in your entire financial life. Not your income, not your investment returns. Your savings rate, the percentage of your take-home pay that you consistently set aside before spending, is the number that determines more than any other whether you will ever become wealthy. Here is why this matters more than most people realize. 2 people can earn identical salaries and end up in completely different financial positions 20 years later. Not because of luck, not because of different investments, but purely because of their savings rate. The person saving 20% of their income and investing it consistently is building real wealth. The person saving 3% or 5% is essentially treading water regardless of how much they earn. The target is simple. At minimum, 10% of your take-home pay should be going towards savings and investing every single month. That is the floor. Not the goal, the floor. The goal is 20% or higher. And before you say that's impossible with your current budget, let me show you what these numbers actually mean in real terms. On a take-home pay of $4,000 a month, 10% is $400. 20% is $800. These are not dramatic numbers, but invested consistently at 8% average annual returns over 30 years, $400 a month grows to $596,000. $800 a month grows to over $1.1 million. The difference between a 10% savings rate and a 20% savings rate on a $4,000 monthly take-home is the difference between retiring comfortable and retiring a millionaire. Now, when Chris sat down that evening and calculated his actual savings rate for the first time, the number he got was 3%. 3%. On a $72,000 salary, Chris was setting aside almost nothing, not because he couldn't, but because he had never measured it. And what you don't measure, you don't manage. The money was coming in, life was expanding to fill it, and 3% was quietly becoming Chris's permanent financial trajectory without him ever consciously choosing it. There is one more thing about your savings rate that is worth understanding clearly. It should always be broken into 3 specific buckets in the right order. First, your emergency fund. Before any investing happens, before any short-term goals, you need 3 to 6 months of essential monthly expenses sitting in a liquid savings account that you never touch except for a genuine emergency. On $3,000 a month in essential expenses, that means $9,000 to $18,000 sitting completely accessible. This is your financial firewall. Without it, every unexpected expense becomes a setback that sends you back into debt and undoes weeks or months of progress. Once the emergency fund is full, and only then, The rest of your savings goes toward investing for the long term and saving for short-term goals like a car, a down payment, or anything else you are actively working toward. The order matters. Emergency fund first. Always. Number 2. Your fixed expenses. Your fixed expenses are every recurring cost that leaves your account every single month, whether you use it or not. Rent, car payment, insurance, subscriptions, loan payments, utilities. Every obligation that is locked in, regardless of your choices in any given month. This number should sit at roughly 50% of your total take-home pay. That is the healthy target. If your fixed expenses are consuming 60% of your income, you are operating in a tight but manageable space. If they are consuming 70% or 75%, which is where Chris discovered his were sitting, you are in a position where building any real wealth becomes almost mathematically impossible, because there is simply not enough room left for meaningful saving and investing after the obligations are met. Here's the thing about fixed expenses that most people get completely wrong when they try to reduce them. They focus on the small things: the daily coffee, the streaming subscription, the gym membership they barely use. And while eliminating waste is always a good idea, cutting small expenses produces small results. If you want to meaningfully change your fixed expense number, you have to go after the big three: housing, transportation, and insurance. These three categories make up the overwhelming majority of most people's fixed expenses. And even a small percentage reduction in any one of them produces results that no amount of coffee cutting can ever match. When Chris looked at his fixed expenses honestly for the first time, he found two things. His car payment was $520 a month on a vehicle he had leased without really running the numbers. And his insurance, which he had never once comparison shopped, was $180 a month when a 15-minute call to a competing provider dropped it to $124. Those two changes alone freed up nearly $180 a month. Not a fortune. But $180 a month invested for 30 years at 8% grows to over $267,000 from 2 phone calls and 1 car decision. That is what attacking the big fixed expenses actually produces, and it is completely invisible to anyone who is only looking at their Starbucks spending. The question to ask yourself about every fixed expense is this: does this cost reflect a genuine choice I am making, or is it a default I never questioned? Most people's fixed expenses are full of defaults: contracts they signed without comparison shopping, services they pay for out of habit rather than intention, commitments that made sense once and have never been revisited. A single afternoon spent auditing every fixed expense in your budget, with fresh eyes and genuine honesty, will almost always produce savings that dwarf anything you could cut from your discretionary spending. Number 3. Your discretionary spending. After your fixed expenses and your savings rate are accounted for, everything that remains is discretionary. This is the money that exists entirely under your control. The restaurants, the clothes, the entertainment, the Amazon purchases, the social spending, the spontaneous decisions. This category should represent no more than 30% of your take-home pay. On $4,000 a month, that is $1,200. Now here is what most financial content gets wrong about discretionary spending. It treats this number as purely something to minimize, as if the goal is to spend as little as possible on things you enjoy. That is not the point. Money is a tool. It exists to fund the life you want. Spending money on experiences and things that genuinely matter to you is not a financial mistake. It is the entire point of building wealth in the first place. The real issue with discretionary spending is not the amount. It is the intentionality. Most people spend their discretionary money in a pattern that does not reflect what they actually value, not because they are irresponsible, but because they have never stopped to examine whether each dollar spent is going towards something that genuinely matters to them or towards something they purchased on impulse and forgot about within a week. Chris discovered this when he went through 3 months of discretionary spending honestly. He valued travel. He had been talking about a trip to Europe for 3 years. But when he looked at where his discretionary money was actually going, he found hundreds of dollars each month on random purchases, things ordered late at night online, meals grabbed out of convenience rather than enjoyment, subscriptions to things he had signed up for and forgotten. The money was there. It just wasn't going where Chris actually wanted it to go. The question to ask before any discretionary purchase is simple. Does this genuinely align with what I value? Not in a guilt-producing way, but in a way that makes every dollar you spend feel like a conscious choice rather than a default. The people who build real wealth are not people who never spend on themselves. They are people who spend on the things that actually matter to them and eliminate the spending that doesn't. That distinction, intentional spending versus automatic spending, is what keeps discretionary expenses at 30% without it ever feeling like deprivation. Number 4, your net worth. This is the number that almost nobody tracks, and the one that changes everything when you start. Your net worth is the complete, honest picture of where you actually stand financially. Not what you earn, not what you spend. What you own minus what you owe. Assets minus liabilities. That difference, that single number, is the only true measure of your financial progress. Calculating it is straightforward. Add up everything you own that has real value: your retirement accounts, your investment accounts, your savings, the value of any property you own. Then add up everything you owe: your student loans, your car loan, your credit card balances, your mortgage if you have one. Subtract the second number from the first. That is your net worth. When Chris did this calculation for the first time, the number he got was negative $11,500. His assets, a car worth about $12,000, a savings account with $3,000, and a retirement account with $8,000, totaled $23,000. His liabilities, a car loan of $8,000, student loans of $22,000, and credit card debt of $4,500, totaled $34,500. Negative $11,500. At 34 years old, with a decade of solid income behind him, Chris's complete financial picture was a negative number. This is not unusual. This is what most people's net worth looks like when they calculate it honestly for the first time, because most people have never calculated it at all. And here's the thing about a number you never look at. It cannot motivate you. It cannot guide you. It cannot show you whether what you're doing is working or not. A negative net worth is not a verdict on your intelligence or your worth as a person. It is simply data. And data is the beginning of a plan. Chris started tracking his net worth at the end of every quarter from that night forward. Not monthly. Quarterly gave enough time for real movement to show up rather than just market noise. And something happened when he started watching that number. It gave him a goal that felt real rather than abstract. The emergency fund filled up. The credit card got paid off. The savings rate climbed from 3% to 11% over 18 months. The net worth went from negative $11,500 to positive $14,000 in just under 2 years. Not because Chris's income changed significantly, but because Chris finally had a scoreboard. And when you can see the score, the game becomes real in a way it never was before. Here's what ties all 4 of these numbers together. They are not separate metrics. They are one interconnected system. Your savings rate determines how much wealth you build. Your fixed expenses determine how much room your savings rate has to operate. Your discretionary spending determines how much life you enjoy while you build. And your net worth tells you whether all of it is actually working. Watch all 4 consistently, and you have a complete, honest, real-time picture of your financial life. Ignore any one of them, and you have a blind spot that quietly undermines everything the other 3 are trying to build. Chris does not have a dramatically different income today than he did the night he sat down at his kitchen table. What he has is clarity. He knows his savings rate. He knows his fixed expenses. He knows where his discretionary money is going and whether it reflects his values. And he knows his net worth, which is no longer negative, and watches it grow every quarter. That clarity, that simple, consistent awareness of 4 numbers, is what separates the people who build real wealth from the people who earn well and somehow end up with nothing to show for it. The 4 numbers are not complicated. They do not require a finance degree or a professional advisor or a sophisticated system. They require honesty and 15 minutes a month to look at them clearly. That is the entire practice. Start it this week. Not next month, not when everything feels more stable. This week. Because the scoreboard you never check is the one that determines the game you never win. If this video gave you something real to work with, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Ken Invests. We put out new videos every week covering the financial truths that most people figure out too late. You watching this tells me you are serious about building something real. Stick around, because what we cover next is just as important as what you heard today. Everything in this video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice.